Hello YouTube. The first female cosmonaut has something to hide, according to reputable Russian media. That is why some claim that we will never know or we will never see Valentina Vladimirovna Tereshkova's candid book about herself ever published, which is a pity. If she had written at least half of the whole truth, the memoirs could have been a world bestseller. Well, in 2018, the 55th anniversary of the flight into space of the first female cosmonaut, Valentina Tereshkova, was widely celebrated in Russia. A large-scale exhibition was held in the State Duma, the Russian parliament, on this occasion, and stories about the heroism of the Seagull, her professional nickname, they were shown on Russian federal TV channels, and a whole section with photographs from the launch of the Vostok 6 and excerpts from the TASS reports appeared on the website of the Korolev Rocket and Space Corporation Energia. Among the materials was published a fragment of Tereshkova's communication with the Flight Control Center on Earth during the takeoff, as well as her flight log. These documents shed light on the circumstances of the flight of the first woman into space. Speculation and secrets around which, nevertheless, there are many of them. Even now, the question arises, why only part of the conversation was presented to the Russian people, and even then more than half a century later after it happened? The launch of Vostok 6 on June 16, 1963 was basically held normally. The ship entered the calculated orbit without any problems, and Tereshkova herself impressed the specialist with her concentration and clarity of actions. "I'm fine, I feel great, I will do my best to fully complete the flight mission." With these words, the Seagull finished her first communication session with the Earth. Everyone who saw Tereshkova during the preparation of the launch and the launch of the spacecraft into orbit, who listened to her reports on the radio, unanimously declared she conducted the launch better than Popovich and Nikolaev. They were cosmonauts, the first to carry out a group flight into space on August 11, 1962. Yes, I'm very glad that I was not mistaken in choosing the first female cosmonaut, admired Lieutenant General Nikolai Kamanin, who was engaged in the training of cosmonauts and made a lot of effort to ensure that it was Valentina who went into space. However, on the second day of the flight, the behavior of the Seagull began to disturb the ground control. Tereshkova's health worsened. Cheerful reports were replaced by evasive answers, and sometimes she simply did not get in touch. The situation was greatly aggravated by solar activity. The air radiation dose received by the astronaut or cosmonaut threatened to exceed the permissible one. In addition, the flashes of the sun led to the swelling of the atmosphere, which increased the natural braking of the ship. In light of these circumstances, the Soviet State Commission, decided to land Vostok 6 on the third day, or on the 49th turn. Before that, Tereshkova had to test the manual control to make sure it was working properly, but she could not do it right away. The management of the flight, watching the flight, was afraid that if the automation controlling the spaceship failed, then it would have to be put down manually. As it turned out later, there really were problems with the control system. During the assembly of the spacecraft, the mechanics made a mistake when installing the wires, which caused the spaceship to turn in the wrong direction, as during testing on the simulator. When the Vostok 6 was ordered to descend, it began to ascend in orbit and vice versa. Fortunately, in automatic mode, the polarity was corrected and manual control was not required during landing. However, for more than 40 years, only specialists or experts knew about the mistake. Tereshkova did not talk about it at the request of the chief designer Sergei Korolev. For a long time, other details of the flight were unknown. I don't think we know even now everything. We do know about the difficulties Tereshkova experienced. The cosmonaut was tormented by pain in her right shin until the end of the flight. She was sick, she could not eat. Poor health was also reflected in the implementation of the flight program. I talked to Tereshkova several times. It feels like she is tired, but she doesn't want to admit it. In the last communication session, she did not respond to calls from the Leningrad center. We turned on the TV camera and saw that she was sleeping. I had to wake her up and talk to her about the upcoming landing and about manual orientation. That's what Kamanin wrote down. She tried to orient the spaceship twice and honestly admitted that she could not orient herself by pitch. This circumstance worries us all very much. If we have to land manually and she can't orient the ship, it will not leave the orbit. Again, this is according to Kamanin. The cosmonaut herself, however, has a different version or account of events explaining the failures. There was an inaccuracy in the automatic program of the ship. It was oriented so that instead of descending, on the contrary, it lifted the orbit. I did not approach the Earth, but with each turn I moved away from it, she said, adding that the situation was corrected only on the second day. Upon landing, the cosmonaut hit her face hard on the helmet, getting a broken nose and an abrasion. Well, some of the secrecy surrounding the flight is easy enough to explain. There was no practical need for a woman to fly into space. Moreover, both Sergei Korolev and academician Mstislav Keldysh, who played a significant role in the Soviet space program, and Konstantin Vershanin, the commander-in-chief of the Air Force, they opposed it. They didn't want a woman in space. On the other hand, General Nikolai Kamanin was burning with this idea, although he was guided by not by necessity, but by public opinion. You see, during his trips abroad with Yuri Gagarin, the first terrestrial in outer space, so to say, he noticed that most often the first cosmonaut is asked, when would a female go into orbit? In addition, he may have been greatly influenced by the large-scale campaign about the American pilot Jerry Cobb, who demanded that she be included in the astronaut detachment. Apparently, Kamanin understood that a woman's flight beyond the Earth is a matter of the near future, and in conditions of fierce competition with the United States for leadership in the space sphere, it is unforgivable to miss such an opportunity. Therefore, the Soviet general made every effort to persuade the leadership of the USSR. The fact that sending a woman into space is more of an image story is confirmed by the way the selection took place. Since there were no female representatives in the officer ranks in the USSR, highest officer ranks, it was decided to hold the competition in the sports direction through DOSAAF. That's the abbreviation for Volunteer Society for Cooperation with the Army, Aviation and Navy, a paramilitary sport organization in the Soviet Union, concerned mainly with weapons, automobiles, and aviation. The criteria presented were quite unsightly. The age was to be up to 30 years, height up to 170 centimeters, and weight up to 70 kilograms for candidates. The only more or less serious conditions is a decent experience in parachuting. As a result, after reviewing the shortlist, 5 were selected from personal files of 58 women: Zhana Yerkina, Tatiana Kuznetsova, Valentina Ponomareva, Irina Solovyova, and Valentina Tereshkova. There was one more, and we'll speak about one more person. But only Ponomareva had practical knowledge and skills suitable for space flight at that time. She mastered the control of PO-2 and the Yak-18 aircraft, and was a mechanical engineer of liquid rocket engines by profession. However, she had a husband and a child, which greatly complicated the selection. However, it is between Ponomaryova and Tereshkova that the main struggle for a place in the Vostok 6 would unfold, and if it had been held even before Gagarin's flight, then probably a more professionally prepared Ponomaryova would have won it. However, at that time, the Soviet leadership already knew what role the first female cosmonaut would play in public life. So far from the last criterion when choosing was the candidate's ability to be active, to meet people, to speak in public, including abroad, as Kamanin said, glorifying communism and attracting millions of people to our side. From this point of view, it was Tereshkova who had the best positions. A daughter from a peasant family, a weaver by basic education. There is even an account that the point in the selection of the first female cosmonaut was proved by the head of the state, Nikita Khrushchev himself, who particularly favored the representative of the textile industry. In addition, Valentina's father, Vladimir, perished during the Soviet-Finnish War when she was 2 years old, and this gave her extra point. This was the war when the Soviet Union attacked Finland, and Finland resisted. Anyway, she was the first to be looked at. She was a simple Yaroslavl weaver, and other women from the cosmonaut squad naturally did not like it. Irina Solovyova and Valentina Ponomaryova were, to put it mildly, dissatisfied. Some researchers also claimed that another, Tatiana Morozicheva, should have been in Valentina's place. She was a world champion, she had many medals, they were bosom friends, or very close friends, so to say. They studied together, but Tatiana had much more in terms of the jumps, 3,500. The official story is this: Morozicheva just got married, got pregnant, and was expelled from the detachment. There were rumors that later in life she became a drunk, having sold all her medals. Well, the reality was quite different, according to some. In the photo you can see the first female cosmonaut, as she justifiably should have been called, Morozicheva Torchilova, Tatiana Petrovna. She is the first in row of brave girls, national and world champion in parachute jumping. On the left is her husband Stanislav. The Morozichev were both recognized authorities of parachute jumping in the Soviet Union. The qualifications of Morozicheva and Tereshkova were even ridiculous to compare, except for one point: loyalty to the Soviet government. Here Valentina was not only in the first place, she was a star. And Tatiana always hated the Soviet government. Having been abroad, she correctly understood where she lived. It was a kindergarten combined with prison. That's how people describe the Soviet Union. And I remember it well, by the way. She lived in a dysfunctional Soviet socialist utopia. The tragedy of the Morozichev family was that their favorite sport was part of the ugly Dosaav system, a monster that prepared cannon fodder for the USSR's war for world domination. The domination of the Communist Party and the proletariat, as they kept telling us daily, be it in schools, at work, on TV, on the radio, in the newspapers. It never stopped. Therefore, Tanya, or Tatiana, was not only allowed into space, the official line being that she was allegedly pregnant, and that's why they would not let her go into outer space. But actually this happened later, after she was expelled from the cosmonaut detachment. Expelled for not passing the loyalty test. It was not difficult not to pass the test. The KGB recorded and listened to conversations of the girls from the parachute team. Any careless statements could ruin a career, and they broke lives of many of the cosmonauts. And then such people would be suspended from work and sports. They endured bullying of officials, they embarked on the path to the bottle, so to say, which millions in the Soviet Union have passed, becoming alcoholics, and their hearts could not always stand it. Now, none of the Morozichi family is alive. They're all gone. And it was a very sad story, and that's what a number of researchers in the former Soviet Union believe. But let's get back to Tereshkova. She did not cause this. It's the system that destroyed Morozichev and so many others. As a result, it was Tereshkova who went into space, even though according to the results of theoretical training and medical examination, she took the last place among the candidates. Perhaps if Ponomaryova had flown instead of her, for which doctors, among others, advocated, the first woman in orbit would have endured the flight much easier, which, however, would not cancel the technical problems, of course, but it doesn't detract from the merits of Tereshkova, the seagull. After landing in the Altai territory, Tereshkova distributed all her edible supplies to the villagers, and she enjoyed their local food. Well, this upset Korolev very much. Besides, he was worried about the deterioration of the health of the first female cosmonaut and problems with the orientation of the spacecraft. He promised not to allow any of the women into space, even the most worthy and prepared, until the end of his days. Indeed, during his lifetime, no other woman crossed the threshold of a spaceship, and the next flight took place when Korolev had been dead already for a long time. But you know what, there is also an account that Sergei Korolev was planning another female flight, but with a spacewalk, and for this he wanted to take the more experienced Ponomaryova and Solovyova. Nevertheless, this did not happen. The Soviet cosmonaut Svetlana Savitskaya flew into space for the second time, and only in 1982, and she was followed by the American Sally Ride in 1983. So this was the first and the last flight of Valentina Tereshkova. After that, she continued to work as the instructor cosmonaut, then as a senior researcher at the Cosmonaut Training Center. Tereshkova became a student at the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy. She became a professor, became the author of more than 50 scientific publications. Valentina Tereshkova said that if necessary, she was ready to fly to Mars, and she was clearly aware that this was a one-way flight, and she would not be able to return from there. Well, the secrecy associated with the flight, her first flight, of course, at least partially, is explained by the fact that the Soviet leadership did not need extra publicity. That's according to other researchers. It was important for the USSR to become the first country to send a woman into space, and nothing should spoil the important moment. Whether it's right or not does not matter anymore. It is important for Russians that the Soviet Union and Valentina Tereshkova entered the history of space exploration. On March 6, 2017, Tereshkova turned 80 years old, and she retired back in 1997 with the rank of Major General. She spends a lot of time with her family. She continues to build a political career in Russia. In 2016, she participated in the parliamentary elections, and she was elected to the State Duma, or the parliament. Whether she will ever reveal more about her flight or concealed pages of Soviet space exploration, no one knows. So I wanted to bring this episode of the very turbulent history of the space exploration in the Soviet Union. Of course, I am proud of people like Yuri Gagarin and Tereshkova and others, and at the same time, I feel sorry for those whose lives were crushed by this effort to be part of the space exploration. Thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my research, you'll find the links in the description to this video, and I will be bringing you more stories about the Russian space exploration and the unusual objects that they see out in outer space. I have a few videos which you can find in my channel, and of course the experience of Chinese and American astronauts and taikonauts are very important, and we should all pay attention to the ongoing space exploration and the direction it will take. Thank you.